Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming today for our recurrent meetup. Uh, the topic today is KrakenD Community Edition. What is it? Why it was chosen, and what are the lessons learned from the practice, API Gateway practice. Before we start, I wanted to remind you how we usually conduct our events. By default, assuming that during the session you will be able to raise your question using the chat. So please post to the chat your question. Then the moderators collect all questions and prepare a list of them. I will ask the questions at the end of the session, and our presenter will be able to answer on them. So if too many questions, sorry, okay, if too many questions happen, the presenter will answer all questions, but potentially it will be a little later in our chat or in the in the page with the event. So also, as usual, the recording of today's session will be published on our sorry, on our YouTube channel. All links will are available by the link. I'll send a link in a couple of seconds into the chat. So looks like I hope all is clear as for organizational part, and let's get started. Victor, it's your turn. Please step in.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. Yes, as it was told, my theme is KrakenD CE API Gateway practice, and it is our practice in our company. Next slide. Yes, my name is Victor Bushmin. I'm an IT business partner and architect in Alpha Strahovani company. It is an insurance company, and it is biggest private insurance company in Russia. I'm busy with integration systems and infrastructural services. Before that, I played with some medtech machine learning things and some simulations platforms to teach people to do something, and high volume machine learning system in production. But today we will talk about integration problems. Two words about Alpha Strahovani. So it is a big company, and it was built by covering by adding multiple businesses. It were 14 businesses were added to it, and each business had its own IT infrastructure and their own way to run it. So we should to make some unified implementation for that. And we work hard and much with the partners, aggregators, data sources, and governance. And today we have like 800 integration in different patterns. So we know much about integration. What is in it for business? So our business strategic components is that we are focused on our team and our employees. We are focused in distribution thing. We are focused on knowing consumers, effectiveness, branding, and product, and how it will be implemented in information technologies. So with patterns, with duplication, with cloud native, DevOps, inner sourcing, and the principles of API first. So I marked a couple of things here, and it is that part which is supported by Kraken, and it is very important for us, the ability of cloud nativeness and easy way to create API to play with it. One thing I want to say right now that the difference between API gateway and, for example, API management is huge. So API gateway, it is just service or better microservice which should publish version of API for users. It should not publish documentation for that API. It cannot support workflow to approve some access. It is just check, can you access it or not? So it is much simpler than API management. API management, it is above API gateway, and you can maybe say that API gatewaying is a small part of it, but I see it like different technologies. That API management, it is some service to interact with APIs, to add new APIs, to get access, to ban some APIs, to change versions of it, and API Gateway just publish it. So I have 3 slides with a big table in it. Or it is a we when we started to choose API Gateway like solution, we started with Camel, and then we take a look to Kong and KrakenD. Why Camel? Camel is a very powerful framework, and we have many teams who use Java programming language and Java application servers, and Camel API Apache Camel API mechanisms are very powerful, and they are easily can be implemented in Java. But the thing is that we have not just Java guys, we have .NET guys, Python guys, and Node.js and front ends and others. But they all need to work with API gateways to change the configuration of it and do it quick and smart and in easy way. So Camel, it is not an option. It's very unified for us, too much. And the same is Kong. So Kong is a great solution. It is based on Nginx, and but it should be configured with Lua scripting. And in my experience, Lua scripting it is not very popular language for Java developers and others. It is something like DevOps thing, nothing else. So we decided to use KrakenD because it is also open sourced. It is Golang, and Golang it is a working language of DevOps, and I like Golang. So and we will stop on some features which are most important for us in API gateways. It is a ability for reverse proxy gateway routing. It is useful for us because we can use API gateway like facade before some huge legacy system to start our transmission from legacy monolith to microservices. And in classical way, you should write many microservices to cover some methods on the legacy system. But here you can just run a couple instances pre-configured API gateways, and it will help a little bit in that thing. So authorization and authentication is very important also because to implement even 0.8.2 and maybe kickoff management, it is not very easy task for junior developers, for example, and it can take maybe a week for them to implement. And here it's all from the box. So caching, la la la. Yes, a very important thing that you can set limits for channels and throttling. It's you can do it with some configuration, and you don't need to implement it in your microservices logging and tracing. When we like microservices, and microservices is nothing without tracing. We want to know all business transactions from set point to the end users, and API Gateway and KrakenD do that thing. So uh, HTTPS centralized configuration is very important because it is our restrictions and requirement that we want to store configuration of microservices and solutions in one place, and it can be Spring Cloud configuration, but it is also well implemented in Kraken. We just use a JSON file which is stored in our GitLab, and we deploy our Helm charts with the current version of this configuration. So it is very useful. Yes, role control. Yes, cloud nativeness is a thing because when we want to run Java application with Camel on it, it will take up to 13 seconds to start in Kubernetes. And KrakenD, I should minimize the waiting timeout to start up to 1 second because it just do nothing all this time. It starts like in 10 times faster than Java. I know that we can play with Java 17 and run it faster in Kubernetes, but here we can do it with a pipeline, and for some cases, I think Golang application is more applicable than Java. So it supports scaling. You can just create so many instances you want without any troubles, and it supports our local acting system like Elastic Storage and others. So how we cook it? We made fork of KrakenD from its side, from GitHub, and we just merged the latest version to our branch. It is stored in our GitLab, and we created some pipeline to deploy it, and at the end of it, it is a Helm chart. Yes, and in basic, KrakenD has no Helm chart, and we just use our own type of it. So we run it as an immutable Docker container. It means that these Docker containers should not share its configuration on any files with other pods. It just has everything on the board, all configuration in one pod, and you can scale it freely. So, and as I said before, a single JSON file for configuration. The thing is that KrakenD provides you to store configuration in multiple files, in template files, so many ways for it. But we wanted to simplify this procedure for average team member, programmer who can just open JSON file and add some endpoints to it, and rerun pipeline, and everything will be okay. So What features we use? The no op option, you can choose in configuration which type of traffic you want to get from backend. It can be JSON and string and some others, JSON array. But if you have legacy like we are, you can set just no op, and it means that KrakenD will not try to parse this traffic. It will just proxy it, but with all policies and rules you attached for that endpoint. It's useful for some strange legacy huge systems without too much documentation to run with. So, um, but when you have a good microservice with JSON answer, you can work with these JSON responses. You can block some answers by role access mode using kicklock GWT. So you can run it very carefully and implement everything you want with that. Stub mode is very useful for to try. So when you have 3 or 5 endpoints, you can implement 3 and 2 just stop, and you already can run this configuration. So it will return fallback at minimum, and after day 2 you can implement these 2 endpoints also. Transaction modification is a powerful instrument. You can change incoming traffic to backend. You can change outgoing traffic after backend. You can mix it and you can parse it, do some calculations, and all of it you can do with just a configuration without any coding. And you can see here metrics and tracing. It's very cool. And everything your team can do with Kraken Designer, we can take a look at it if we will have time for it. But you can just Google it, Kraken Designer, and play with it. It's just a web application. So I used KrakenD like sidecar with, as I told, some legacy application. For example, I had a CDI with a SOAP protocol, and also it supports WADL, WADL REST interface, but it knows nothing about tracing, GWT, TLS, metrics, etc., etc. So I placed instance of Kraken D with only one configuration to share endpoints of these CDI servers, and my consumers can work with it like with any other REST or Magic Kraken do. So I'll tell about that magic a little bit later, but this is the main idea of using like sidecar. So this sidecar makes the solution well scaled in cluster, fast to start deploy, meets all our architecture requirements, lightweight for Kubernetes. I told it it starts in 1 second. Um, you can configure TLS on the level of Ingress Kubernetes or on the level of KrakenD itself. So, as I told, you can make REST from everything. I will return for the slides later. And 2 words about manipulation with traffic. So an example about this CDI application. So we had a problem that we needed 2 authorization headers. First header authorization with GWT token to validate connection on KrakenD, and the second header should be thrown to CDI system itself to authorize user. But Kraken Ingress, it implements too well this RFC 7230, and the standard says that you cannot send 2 authorization headers at once in one call. So what we can do, we can name one of these headers like authorization basic, and we will send 2 different headers, authorization basic and authorization. And this part of configuration, it is example of a KrakenD configuration with a Martian modifier that just copy from authorization basic to authorization, and after that it will send this authorization header to the system, backend system, and everything will be okay. So also you can use a circuit breaker. I don't know, do we have time for it? So, but you can see it in KrakenD design, this configuration traits, GraphQL, AWS Lambda. We don't use AWS Lambda. Manipulation, I said. So back to KrakenD Designer. I think we don't have much time for it, but so it is a view of KrakenD Designer. You just upload your configuration file here, and after that you can tap on any setting and step by step fill this file, and it will lint your configuration automatically, and will guide you from the beginning to the end. And it is very useful for average teams because they are not ready to teach new schema of JSON file. They have their own to know about, but they can do it in UI mode. Here you can see this circuit breaker button using with AMPQ. I didn't try an AMQP because we use mostly Kafka in our solutions, and you can modify responses. So what I have here, yes, and other useful thing, you can start your REST microservices fast. So what do you need? You can just stop your answers and make a test double for your colleagues, and after that, just changing the configuration, you will have a production implementation of your API. But if you want to play honestly, you can install this configuration. So DB with Hasura, and KrakenD will call to Hasura with GraphQL. And it will be just drafting implementation of any REST which should use its backend. But we all know that mostly it will be work with some database. So like just example. So I have no slides here, and if we have time, I can show a little bit KrakenD Designer. Do you mind?
Yes, please show us.
So I will share my browser. Uh, so another. Oh, where's my so share? Oh, another one. Try. Mm, where is it? Oh, yeah. Chrome. Here I
Yeah,
am.
yes, we can see.
That is the most weird part to remember. Right buttons. Crack and the designer. Ow. What domain? Oh, here we are. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, in this section, you can drop your JSON file you have to work with, or just you can create some new configuration, and you just fill all these fields. You have 5 fields for global configuration. I mean, it is configuration of API gateway itself, uh, and one button for endpoint. So what you can set here, it's a global timeout for everything, and you can tweak these timeouts for each endpoint or group of endpoints later in the endpoints section. You can easily turn on HTTPS and set here certificates. You can see here some enterprise thing. So I didn't test enterprise, but mostly I didn't need it. So service settings. Oh, on. Ah, it was service settings. Yes. Some security features, bot detector, CORS, HTTP security, and you press the button, and here you can type any policy. You can everything of these write in JSON itself, but when you just start, it it is much easier to make it with a designer first. Supported telemetrics, so it's logging, uh, metrics for Prometheus, and here we can choose different ways to collect our tracing. We like Zipkey for us, but you have many options here. API keys, it is enterprise thing, and you can feel like you have AIM, and API documentation is also enterprise. We didn't use it, but I think I saw some open project for it to generate from the configuration of KrakenD your own Swagger type description. But as I said before, we don't need it. Mostly, I see this Kraken designer like a huge support for microservice and even community edition for microservice patterns, because you don't need huge API gateway with features you will never use for your in your microservices. You want just to take a small domain and cover it with API gateway, and you want to run it fast and without any uh, thinking. And the solution for that is API. So API, KrakenD API gateway, it's like microservers, uh, micro API gateway for you. Because if you will compare it with Kong, other things, you will see that it is not so unified as them. But I don't like unified solutions. They're too complicated for teams to work with. So here, as I told before, the name of our endpoint, the method we want to use, the output, as I said, JSON, negotiate content string, now up. So if something goes weird, you just can use no op. Um, uh, so here we can tweet. Oh, where's my scroll? Oh, here we are. Um, we can switch a couple of buttons. Um, for incoming traffic, and we use token validation, and it can be used just to check is your GWT is okay. Oh, it can support your backend. If your backend cannot work with GWT, it can do some workaround algorithm for it, but I will not stop on this point. Here's button for circuit breaker. You just need to set interval to retry and timeout between it, and how many errors will be okay for you to start this circuit breaker. So I think I reached the limit of my timing. Have Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions, and um, so could you please explain what is the reason for the forking KrakenD? It is slide number 8. You said that
Oh yes,
you
yes. I didn't mention it because we're a financial organization and we have some restrictions from the central bank, and it says for us that we should use a supported application, vendor supported, and we should check its security implementation. So my pipelines, they have a job with a Sonar Cube statical review for this code to make sure that no bug was there. And other thing that I run my KrakenD application in backend of backend of backend, and it has no access to internet. And when you run KrakenD, it wants at first to send telemetry to the some server, and I just switched off this line in code and run it without it. So these two things made me to make a fork of it. And our security department is very pleased with it, so they can control source code by themselves and scan it anytime they want. So something like that. Other
okay, thank
question?
you. Yeah, and on the slide number 9, where you described features, it was transaction modification. What is the functionality hidden on the sentence? What does it mean in terms of API gateway?
Oh, you should read a little bit of documentation, but there are different levels of transformation. The bytes even. So you can work on a HTTP level. So you can add any header or cut any header. You can transform data in body. You can mix data before you will send it to backend, something like that. And you can use LURAS, LURA scripting. that transformation I showed you, Marshall transformations. It is much easier. It is not algorithmic. You can use just implemented features, but it will cover many of your feature requests for transformation. So when you want to tweak something in your traffic, you can use Kraken and without any programming and writing code. So just configuration.
Okay, great. And the next question: Did you, you decided to choose KrakenD, did you compare KrakenD with Kong, for example, from performance perspective?
Oh, it was funny story with the Kong and Camel. So, in speed, we compared with our Camel application. I talked about that. But when we started to compare with Kong, it's too complicated documentation for me in Kong. Many plugins you should to install, and some of them are enterprise, others are not. But the main thing is that we have limits for Lua scripting in our company, and it were no DevOps who wanted to support Kong, but they are all okay with Golang application because you can write your own plugins in Golang in maybe half an hour for KrakenD and run it. And Kong is much bigger solution for API gateway than Kraken, and we wanted just microservice API gateway.
Thank you. Uh, Colleagues, do you have any question? Because I don't see additional question in the chat. Maybe if you have, please unmute yourself and say it. Yeah, Gabriel.
Thanks, Tim. Well, I have a little question. I have tried to use, in this case, for a particular proof of concept, right? This API gateway. And one of the questions that I have is, if you can, I don't know, illustrate us a deployment model for a KrakenD cluster, for example, in this case in Kubernetes, or if you can illustrate us the deployment model that you have used in this case.
Yes, I understand. So my implementation is very easy. We use immutable Docker container. It means that a configuration file is a part of pod. So I made my own Docker file, and in a pipeline, I just built new image with built-in configuration files and everything I want. And after that, I run this instance in Kubernetes, and I can made copies of it just with the scale option in Kubernetes, and the load balancing will be run with ingress of Kubernetes with its policies. And any of these KrakenD instance will work. It is not a cluster with a shared configuration, but it is shared because they are all based on the same. I can see some issues on that implementation, but it is a part of the magic of Kubernetes to deploy the correct version of my Kraken each time. So for us, it works perfectly.
Okay, and in front of this Kubernetes cluster, basically you have ingress gateway of type load balancer, right? Is my understanding?
Yes.
Okay, and you have multiple KrakenD instances in different namespaces, or you have deployed the different instances in different namespaces. So how do you guarantee the corresponding high availability of those instances?
Our design is based on domain-driven development, and we have namespaces for each domain, and the entry point to work with API for this domain is Kraken itself. So, and the thing of it's working is on shoulders of Kubernetes itself, and we didn't have any issues. We run it on tier 2, so 4 nines, and last year everything were okay, and we didn't have any troubles. But we didn't set it to high load, high volume traffic, because it is a part of some domain, and each domain has less volume of traffic than the entry point at the front. But I want to say that even in front point, we have just 3 instances of Kraken, and our maybe 60,000 in 10 minutes traffic. It can support freely, so I didn't found any limits of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, if no, I would like to say thank you for everybody, especially for Victor, our presenter. It was interesting, and if you will have a question, you can write this question into one of our resources. It could be YouTube, it could be chats or LinkedIn group, which is available by the link in the chat. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Have a good day. Have a good morning, probably. Okay. Thank you.